But the comet is relatively important because the concept of the solar wind arose because astronomers were looking at the behavior of comet tails. That's how the solar wind concept arose to begin with. We would prefer to have a solar electric field, and that's important. You know, one of the things that I did was to look for the expected vents on the surface of 67P and tried to characterize what were the zones of activity and what were they like, and tried to compare it with the close approach of the Cassini spacecraft to the South Pole of Enceladus.
Okay.
And in my opinion, the morphology of the activity in the South Pole of Enceladus and the activity in the surface of the comet, 67P, are pretty much the same thing. So
you see those filaments there? Wow.
Yeah, yeah. Which comet is this? Is this taken from?
This is it's just comet tails blowing the solar wind. What I do is I'll try to bring up stuff that's kind of close to what you're talking about.
Got it. Absolutely. I get to see now. No, yeah, that's we have had a couple of press releases talking about the electrification of comet tails. We have reports of spacecraft electrification on Cassini as it's traveling through the plumes of Enceladus. And now we have Langmuir probes aboard Rosetta giving us our readings of the space environment of the comet itself. So there's a lot to go on now. We can produce a very good case based on sanctioned, or I would say peer-reviewed observations.
Welcome to the December 18th edition of the Electric View. I'm Neil Thompson. Today we have Jim, Robert, Ignacio, Heather, Buddy, Richard, Edwin, Dave, and Dave. We will be talking about how we interpret astronomical data, what oddities and enigmas have led to a more satisfying electrical interpretation, and Dave gets to show us his new electrical spheres. Please take a moment to like and subscribe.
Since this is all coming as a projection, are there methods of doing like what it's kind of parallax how you would determine what the three-dimensional positioning of?
Okay, so the last thing we have, the biggest, greatest thing we have is the Gaia data release 2 set. What that image that you're seeing on screen is produced by the Gaia team.
Okay.
The darkness that you're observing are actually obscurations. I mean, it's the probe, the scanning telescope cannot see stars there, and it's because there's dust there. Gaia has parallax measurements that are good to about 5,000 light years. After 5,000 light years, the error bars grow to the point that, But there are some people now that are trying to transform those parallax measurements into a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. And there is a source called Galaxy Map, literally, that is trying to produce that as we speak.
Okay.
I advocate the perception of the galaxy through the dust, and note that panoramic perspective has to be grasped first. What you're seeing is a very wide, fish-eyed image of the galaxy.
Right.
And if you look closely, the stuff, it looks kind of bulgy towards the middle of the image. Only looks bulgy because it's close to you.
Okay.
Galactic center and the galactic bulge cannot be perceived, in fact. And if it, about a fifth, if you divide the image in 5 parts, the fifth to the left is a molecular cloud that's coming at you. And the clump that's kind of almost gray but still dark back there is towards Cygnus, which is galactic latitude 90. And the stuff moves towards the center of the image, growing in scale because it's actually getting closer. And so you can learn to perceive the depth in these panoramic images if you have grasped or learned to recognize panoramic perspective.
Right.
And then you could leap into conscious. To me, it's a very structured and deep image. But I've also grew into that capacity because I was a panoramic photographer and I studied the galaxy in a panoramic format in multiple wavelengths. And so that's how it appears to me. I kind of know where these things are instinctively, and I can corroborate it because there's always embedded sources within the dust. These embedded sources are bright in the infrared and often also have a parallactic measurement from Gaia DR2. Therefore, you can pin down the location of the particular cloud, and with doing so, we can build it out completely.
Right. Well, what's your feel on this? Has been a topic of discussion a number of times, but because of the very, very tiny arc length of doing parallax, calculations of distance, etc. What's your sense of the posit hypothesis is that the accuracy of distances measured through this means is very highly inaccurate.
So by early 20th century technology, you could know with certainty out to maybe 100 light years.
Okay.
The Hipparcos mission improved that to about 1,000 light years, maybe. The Hipparcos mission went through a long post-flight data reduction process because their spacecraft didn't achieve proper orbit, and ESA finally published it, and it had been the standard for about 15, 20 years. With the Gaia mission, which is a whole new telescope, and an entirely new strategy to scan the sky, I haven't digested the Gaia instrument. So I cannot tell you whether their claim to accuracies. So when they flew the mission, they said that they would produce parallaxes good to 1 milliarc second out to about 25,000 light years, which seemed preposterous. I think that about 5,000 light years, it's good. And I've worked with it already, and I have access to it. And I think to about 5,000 light years, it's damn accurate. And I would add that stars in dusty areas with companions tend to have inaccurate parallax measurements. That's where it fails, I discovered.
Yeah, the distortion through the medium is another one that we've discussed a bit. Is that do you warm up to that idea or not?
That depends on the strength of the magnetic field, and the distortions include that strong magnetic fields produce in light. And I wouldn't know. I don't know how much that would be, but the particulate, the dust that's out there wouldn't distort by diffraction the position of the star. A strong magnetic field might. A strong magnetic field around a strong current that's also aggregating dust might produce that. But the effect has not been reported, and I haven't encountered a competent model for that sort of distortion.
Oh,
what I do know is that
it goes together.
Jim?
Well, he's saying that questions around where you see the dust, but remember, at the edge of where the neutral matter is, that's where you should see like an ionization front. And that's where you get the crazy effects on the light, whether it's like Edward Dowday's model or the mainstream ideas of like redshift and blue shift in ionization fronts. See if there is a dusty area, and then you go at the transition from like a neutral dust area to plasma. There should be an ionization front, and that's where that really messes up the path and the frequency of light, basically, right there.
Okay, it would take a computational approach, crunching the VR2 and later we'll have a VR3 data sets directly and to accomplish this. A knowledge of Python would be really good for that. Gaia was like a regatta. You know how all the ships line up at the start? That's how graduate students were doing, waiting for the Gaia data release.
Right.
Thousands of graduate students looking to exploit and get ahead in their careers by crunching Gaia VR2 data. So if there are anomalies, I presume they would come out from there. Even if they called it something else, my impression is that they are, the field is primed for all kinds of stuff coming out of VR2, data release 2, and that's what we're seeing. If you go through the archive, the Cornell archive, new releases, you'll find that stuff related to VR2 is just beginning to pour in.
Yeah, that'd be really cool to look at. I mean, they basically post the data sets.
They don't post the data sets. They post papers and results.
Okay.
It's a public data set. It's a very big data set.
Uh-huh.
I have kind of user access through Aladdin, which is the ESA's interface for a variety of... Aladdin is a visual interface for the Sinbad dataset. The Sinbad dataset is a master catalog of objects in astronomy. If it's not in Sinbad, it doesn't exist.
Okay.
Or hasn't been found. So you can have access to the VR2 through Aladdin and Aladdin Lite, which is easy to work with. But it's still, for the novice astronomer, it's still a leap up, a big step up.
Yeah.
I'm willing to help anybody. I'm willing to share anything I know.
Yeah. No, thanks. Yeah, I'm really curious about it and interested in looking at it. Yeah. So.
Right.
Very cool. And I'm really good with C#, and I could I could get fast on Python fast.
Yeah. Apparently, it's not a difficult language to master. And I've seen some of it. But it takes.
I've looked at it a bit, but not. I haven't chopped up on it. So.
Okay, so there is an interface called TopCat.
Okay. And
TopCat, as in top catalog, the icon of a little cat, shareware. That's the
TopCat
statistical interface that's being most commonly used to crunch Gaia data. And I guess if you go to ESA Gaia Sky or something like that, you may find a link. Yeah, that might do it.
Oh yeah, cool. All right, awesome.
Yeah, that's the way in.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely take a look at it.
All of these things are the kind of stuff, I mean, it's so advanced and so complex that a single guy doing this is either not going to get very far or
right. Well, I mean, this is the beauty of like kind of linking up, because I'm in the same boat, kind of, you know, and it's this is what's been nice about getting the group together, because you get a lot of insight from a different point of view than you would have generated yourself, you know.
Yeah.
And just like you're doing work like this here, which admittedly is incredibly important, we also have other people working on different aspects in their own little groups. Like, unfortunately, that when John Cook passed on there, his group is still going, even though he's no longer there to moderate it. And they're still working very hard to build their mythological time frame, like trying to decipher myths using ancient records and so forth, and building a chronology of the past, which, just like this, is out of my purview. They're both things I'm very interested in, but obviously I'm not an astrophysicist, nor am I a historian, so...
Okay, yeah, so, but this is where you start getting this, you know.
Well, I love the merger.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of by the paradigm, we're locked into this siloing of disciplines, you know, and since we can mix them, it's an awesome time to be.
I am recording, by the way, Robert. If you're asking, I saw that posted down there. So.
Just making sure that so we probably have a better version later here, but just I can add the time to it.
Yeah, it's all good.
Okay,
perfect. The topic of mythological reconstruction, I have something to add.
Yeah.
We have the concept of uniformalism or uniformitarianism. That we have the gradual or constant change across time. One of the things that is a problem in mythological studies is a related perspective. That is, most people believe that the texture of human consciousness is relatively constant, moving back into time. That is, that the consciousness or awareness that we have, informed by our physical senses, is what has shaped our consciousness throughout the millennia.
Right. Right.
That may not be true.
I think it's a major assumption.
It's a major assumption, and I have information from my studies of anthroposophy, of all things.
I've been getting into that recently, bizarrely enough. Yeah. Diving into Rudolf Steiner.
Steiner talks about a tremendously different consciousness that existed in eras past.
Yes.
And the mythological narrative that arrive may be referring to some of those experiences, as opposed to strictly an interpretation of what happened in the natural environment.
Right.
And there is very little way of discerning that kind of stuff.
From a measurement point of view.
From here, from now, from hard science, you know, validate
empirical.
Yeah, empirical.
But this is where you start, you know, it jumps into this area that I think we're ultimate. The pointing vector is pointing. I go POY. I read it with it.
Other thing that may be relevant is that people in the past may have had a deeper experience of the infrared sky. That I don't know if it was, you know, 30, 40,000 years ago, people may have had retinas that were more attuned to infrared light.
Right.
And the reason why I say this is because there are objects out there that are bright only in the infrared that tend to be constellations. Like, for instance, in Perseus, there is a patch of sky that is very bright in the infrared, and it cannot be seen in the visible. And it looks crazy, like a head with snakes coming out of it.
Right.
It looks like the Medusa head.
Wow. Okay. Right. Yeah, it's a great myth.
It's a great myth.
Yeah.
But it's
that could almost be why the star maps of old would have been having all those illustrations that nobody sees anymore. They were like, they always wonder why the star lines don't ever match up with the real picture. Maybe this is why they actually did see it in a different spectrum.
That's what I'm proposing. Is that
that's awesome?
Seeing in the infrared is probably very likely, and the constellations that we, as we experience it, have been rehung on the sky after an extended period of darkness.
Well, actually, you could be wrong, but yet right. Maybe it wasn't us. I mean, if the Neanderthals were actually a different type of creature and had bigger eyes than us and so forth, perhaps maybe we are inheritors of their mythology. But as much as the Medusa head might appear in the sky now, it still doesn't equate to the Kali and the burning of the land by the stories of the intense heat that came down.
Correct.
But there's also, of course, the idea that there's some things that can only be seen in ultraviolet too. So, which I saw in some structures, like some of that Zechariah Stitchin video or something showed like something with like you can only see it in ultraviolet or something if you shine a UV light on it or whatever. But so I'm open to the idea.
Well, remember we talk about that though with like eye development in I remember talking about that that eye surgeon that realized that the human eye, almost all modern human eye diseases are caused by the fact that our eyes are not, even now, really adapted to ultraviolet, like cataracts and retinal damage is caused by ultraviolet light. Like our eyes are more suited for more red light than what we're seeing. We don't get damage from red light.
Wouldn't that imply a darker Earth too?
Because our eyes are not.
Or more purple.
It implies that our eyes still are not adapted to the bluish end of the spectrum that we're seeing. So that would imply then that maybe ancient people did have more in the other spectrum to see and did see better in that part of the spectrum.
This is a very interesting topic.
The result.
I think even on the Ganymede hypothesis, they were talking about that.
Oh,
because
yes,
on one side of the Earth was darker, and they had like different eye sockets, tells the structures and stuff.
But there are skulls that exist with larger eye sockets out there, like those conehead skulls from Peru happen to have larger eye sockets and stuff. So I don't know. It's a very. I mean, we have to look at this through fresh eyes. But go on, Ignacio. I'm sorry for interrupting.
It's the size of the rods in the back of the retina that actually gives you the wavelength that you're looking at. The photons interact physically with the scale of the cells in the retina. So that if it's not necessarily that they had bigger eyes, but the physiology, the soft tissues in the back of the retina would have to have either mutated or just changed.
Or they could have been a different creature.
You see? But if they were bigger cells in the back of the retina, they'd be more tuned to longer wavelengths, aka red light.
It's very interesting.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the stuff that I'm picking up on as I get my first exposure to anthroposophy is this alternate narrative as far as like, and the one that it solves for me, which has always bothered me with the existing mainstream narrative, is like where did the Egyptian sophistication and the Sumerian sophistication come from all of a sudden with your narrative, and that always perplexed me. But anthroposophy, because of the Atlantean model, it solves it, for me. So there's some I have resonance with that part of it.
I would caution that Steiner spoke to the people in his time with the language that he could speak with.
Mm-hmm.
I was I was very interested in anthroposophical cosmology, and I respect Steiner very much. But I also know that there's some profound limitations to what he could say or how he could transmit what he perceived.
Right.
And inasmuch as he tried to be a clear thinker, he did produce spiritual science.
Right.
But it's actually not science until the observation can be repeated or some form of confirming experience to bear.
There's quite a bit though with harmonization with what Casey was talking about too.
It comes down to the idea in modern parlance that the world of the afterlife and the world of the dreams are basically all the astral plane.
Right.
And that we have unexperience in the astral plane that ensues through emotional contents, but we don't have the sort of consciousness that has objective perceptions
right
up there. And so,
that's the work he's proposing, where you equalize those two.
Yeah, absolutely. And so nowadays we have to say, well, that's also the space in which we meet intelligences from across the stars. Right. And then there's, I believe in a plurality of worlds. That comes all the way back from the 16th century. There are more worlds, and there also are more forms of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And that also complicates the idea of historical reconstruction via mythological record. On the other hand, it does promise that at some point we can have contact with intelligences from across the galaxy, and that we can visit the events of the past by elevating ourselves up into those heights, and then circumvent archaeology and geology and all the things that we need to cobble together to try to have a model of the ancient past and the ancient catastrophes and all that stuff.
Right. It's a pretty radical proposition. I'm super intrigued by it, though.
Me too.
Oh, cool. All right. Nice to meet you.
Same.
So, and by the way, Jim tuned me into this pathway, so I'll blame Jim. And Heather, by the way. So, yeah, for sure. So, but this is one of the things that we like to, we feel the freedom at this point to explore, as wide a spectrum as we can, and then try to do it in a cordial and fun way. So this is an example of the flow of consciousness, the direction that we just went to, so that we get to. So thank you. Thanks for going there. This is quite a bit of confirmation on like this path that I'm going through right now, and it's like, this is the craziest stuff I've ever read. It's like, should I even entertain this? So cool.
Yeah, well, but officially or technically that would be the mystery school stream.
Right, exactly, and then it ties in with Pythagoras, and then the Egyptian stuff, and then it opens up a whole different perspective of looking at this stuff from the way that we've been exposed to it. Yeah.
The problem in anthroposophy is that you start reading Steiner, and he's so eloquent and so extense that you end up not reading anything else. Fall into some sectarian cultural niche.
Right.
And then you're an acolyte. You're not a researcher.
Yeah. Right.
And that's not.
He was remarkably prolific.
Yes, exactly. In fact, he was, and profound. And you can start reading Steiner, and boy, you just go down that avenue.
Yeah.
And I did that for 15 years.
Wow. Okay.
I was in my 20s, 20, 25. I did that in my 20s and 30s.
Okay.
I know all about it, both pro and con.
Okay.
And believe me, they're both.
Yeah. I mean, I hear it's the whole pathway through Goethe's scientific work, which is fun to look at just by itself in relation to what our pathway has been, and then him being like the chosen scribe of Goethe, and then published and then celebrated, and then going this direction. It's like, and it's a very interesting, just a bio to begin with. So.
Yeah. So, in the deep Western history, the inner circle of anthroposophy recognizes Steiner as the reincarnation of Thomas Aquinas.
Really? Okay.
Yes. Okay. And Thomas Aquinas as a reincarnation of Aristotle.
Wow.
When you say Thomas Aquinas, or when you say Steiner, the inner circle of anthroposophy would say Steiner, Aquinas, Aristotle.
Uh-huh. Well, there's your pragmatism.
There's your pragmatism, right?
Yeah.
And then also his Christian outlook, because some have told me, some German people I've met had said that Steiner is a Jesus freak.
Uh-huh.
I wouldn't define him that way, but there is a profound and a consistent Christian esoteric message with Steiner as well.
Right.
On the other hand, he treats all the mystery schools in ways that you will not find treated anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a deeper conversation right there. And the mystery schools lead to altered states of consciousness and a transcendental way of perceiving history and human consciousness.
Right, and dream reality.
Correct.
Right.
And that takes us back to mythology and sort of the reconstructed nature of the sky and of the constellation. You see?
Yeah.
And so, that's
and what we're seeing when we look up there, I mean, is it a reflection of the internal, or the collective?
So then you speak of astral experiences always being dressed in the psyche of the perceiver.
Okay.
And it's the problem with astral clairvoyance in general.
Okay.
Astral clairvoyance is always cast in the sort of stage or in the costumes of the consciousness of the clairvoyance. And you have to go further up into the mental plane, as was being designated by anthroposophy and theosophy. Above the astral, there is the mental plane. There's an objective reality there.
I feel like I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons again.
Yeah, well, the language is the language of mysticism and spirituality.
Well, no, I know that they had to remove all that from the first Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Dungeon Master's Guide back in like '82 because they were like, well, this is all copywritten by H.R. Lovecraft and yada yada, and they had to change the word demon to daemon and all that stuff, which totally ruined it.
They did that in Unix too.
Huh?
They did that in Unix too.
They did that in Unix.
You guys.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
You guys. Sorry. Yeah.
You guys.
Yeah, it's I think I'm expecting a call out of there 2 or 2:30. But if I have to jump off,
where are you located, by the way?
I am in New Hampshire at the moment.
Oh, very cool. All right, I got a close friend of mine in Vermont, around Burlington.
Yeah, that's a different country. We don't go to.
Yeah, right. Very cool. All right. Well, if you have to go, I hope you can join us again. Really.
Not immediately, but
okay.
I have to jump off. That's what happened.
Okay, gotcha. So, what do you think, Neil?
What do I think about what?
The year in review.
Well, I'll go with the 8 months in review. Well, I suppose a year because it took like 4 months before we actually started filming them, or I thought I had like all this footage and I had lost it all. but it was all recorded on the laptop. It was nothing compared to what we are doing now. And yeah, I'm very happy. I can't believe how well this is going and how many friends I'm making.
Cool.
I mean, the people, what make it worth it. And by making ourselves, I don't want to say, because there are people who put themselves up as gatekeepers, doors you must pass through before you can be regarded as someone.
I was reading about that last night.
What?
I was reading about that last night, too.
Oh, okay. Well,
anyway.
I just meant, like, and I'm not, please don't, I'm not in any way bashing these people when I say what I'm about to say. But unlike institutions, okay.
There's a name for that, what you just did.
I know. I don't know what the word is, but I'm sure it's bad. But no, there's this idea that, like, for example, when you get so big, like, for example, our friend Ben and the SO group, you're bringing through there. If Ben likes you, you can go on to something on the show and be part of the SO. And I'm not saying that. I mean, he has his own world, but the same sort of thing can happen with the. In fact, that was a big issue when you wanted to come on and you had to convince Gene.
Oh yeah,
you can go to the thing.
This is exactly the interesting, just as far as just a point of reference, perhaps. That I feel that it's the E view, the electric view, has achieved an independence, and we're our own satellite that doesn't need. We're associated positively in a symbiotic way with, I think, both Ben and Thunderbolts, but we're our own animal at this point, and we don't have to, this is always a thing for me. It's like we don't have to ascribe to any, dogma, which I think is kind of a cornerstone piece of where this has kind of organically grown, And,
I just like
I'm
the
very,
fact that
I'm very
we invite
happy
people.
about that. So.
I like inviting people in. Like I want
From
people from because there's a lot of voices out there that don't get heard enough.
Yeah.
Or at all. Like, I mean, here, like, this is the first time I've met you, I've talked to you before, but we had that wonderful discussion trying to convince some girl or some lady, I should not say a girl, that her information theory, we had a big debate about that while you were setting up something in a room. In the back there, I think, of one of the breakout rooms, and I was tasked with basically getting this person off of Gene's back, if you know what I mean. So I had to here we are. I'll listen to you for 20 minutes and hear what you have to say. And I think it was yourself that came up from and said something like, "I've been listening to what you have to say, but I disagree with your premise." I think that was you, but anyway, this is the type of thing where some people need to be heard more, and or they get their voice out. And if nothing else, they get to. We're not going to blow smoke up their ass. We're going to question them, but at the same time, we're certainly not putting ourselves up as gatekeepers like the Dragon's Den or something, or Shark Tank or whatever it is there you have in the States there. So I don't want to be in that realm. I want to be invited.
Except for Trevor Tola. Right?
Oh no, Trevor's become my friend fast again.
Really?
I love the way you said "really." By the way, that was just the best. I would record that. It was the incredulity in the tone. No. He must have had a mental healing and has requested once again has unblocked me and requested to be my friend. So it's just a cycle. It goes up and down.
I just had my little experience with him the other day where I posted the SO episode about the CIA file. And the and he had and I posted it. I cross-posted it a lot on other pages, and he rebutted me, and not only rebutted me, but he cross-posted the rebuttal on every page. So I had to have a laugh moment with him.
It's a very interesting dynamic. You got a bad connection, unfortunately.
So I just want to publicly give thanks to Ben Davis for teaching me about the sun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Walt Thornhill for opening my eyes to the electric solar system in general, and reawakened my interest in space exploration of the solar system, because now there was a whole other way of understanding it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're definitely, you know, they're pillars and definitely worthy of praise, and we certainly do that. But we'll also like criticize details for sure.
Well, necessarily, you know.
I have one.
Critical mindset is not a negative mindset. It's just a mindset that understands the parts and wants to understand how they're connected.
Right.
Indeed.
But I was.
Hey, buddy,
I do have one.
I think that's you. We got noise coming through.
Actually, I don't think it is.
Is
I
it?
think,
Oh,
I think it's Ignacio.
It's my fan, and I don't.
Oh, you have fans? You have fans at your house?
No, it's a fan on the computer.
Oh, yeah. I had to edit my fan out too. If my computer sounds like it's about to take off and go into outer space sometimes when I'm playing a video game, so I understand.
I have a criticism though.
You do? Oh, well,
Yes.
Come on, Robert. What's the criticism?
Well, to be fair, I just
To be fair.
purchased the Kira and Lulu Visit the Planets, the second book in the series, and it mentions them visiting the comet and everything, and they're with the dirty snowball theory, basically. And
This is Ben's book. Ben's
yes,
children's book.
well, it's his wife's cat.
Well, Ben is kind of one of those weird people that's kind of half and
that.
half. You know, he's
Yeah, it was the rest of the book, but when they went up to talk about the comet, it was like, that's definitely with the dirty snowball theory. I was a little bummed about that.
Well, it could be bum, but see, I don't know. I shouldn't say anything bad about Ben. Like I said, I don't know if he was trying to put a dig at someone though by putting that in there.
I'm not trying to either.
No, not you. I just meant
I was
wondering if he
expecting
just
it.
thought.
You know,
Yeah, you were
What's
thinking
up
it
with
would
this?
go with
What's up
totally
with this
the
video he put out.
Right.
This is a crazy video.
Tell me
I
more.
put it in the Skype chat that I put. What do you think, Robert, of that thing?
which one?
It's the catastrophism one. I mean, it's interesting because he's talking about, you know, the polar shift, and then
Right.
we wouldn't see it. It's basically like a 1 day reset where everything shifts, or like over 1 day, right?
Well, there's actually work going into that I don't want to talk about right now because I promised someone I can't, but it's coming out.
Oh yeah, okay.
But yeah, but there's something almost behind that, and I know Trevor. This was the stuff that, like I said, Trevor was instantly rebutting on and cross-posting about was the episode that we're talking about from SO.
Yeah,
the
it went
CIA
pretty,
file that got released.
the CIA file. That's the one.
Yeah.
I've never heard it. What happened?
We
Oh
do
yeah,
want to pull it up.
this just happened. Yeah. I mean, this.
Yeah, look up the latest.
It's pretty viral.
Vicious Observers. Yeah,
Yeah.
episode.
Yeah.
Well, to watch him jump into catastrophism with both feet is kind of interesting. I mean, obviously, him and Michael Steinbacher had some great connections. Him and Billy Elverton and stuff. But there was always I didn't know where that ended up. I didn't know if he went along with it. He's like I said, he's always been kind of half and half. Sometimes he's into using the conventional terms, and sometimes he's gone down into the EU completely. So I don't know where he sits sometimes, and I'm okay with that.
Right.
It's good to it's good to be conscious of your intellectual environment. So and you have to word things certain ways so that you can attract more people. So these are probably things that are on his mind. So I'm open to. I mean, he's getting the word out in many fronts anyway. I mean, it's not like Walt Thornhill and David Talbot don't pop up. Once the name pops up, you start typing them in, you're immediately onto the EU thing, which can go a bit deeper than some of the things that the suspicious observers go into, because they're mostly focused on the sun and certain things like that. But there are exceptions. And so, what's the CIA one? I want to know more.
Well,
about
this is what you're talking about. Look at how. I mean, he just released this on the 16th. He's already got 150,000 views.
Well, he has 340,000 subscribers. He has
I know,
literally
but that's yeah. But I mean, that's a hot
hot topic. Oh yeah,
yeah.
Woo.
So
I think, may I say something?
of course.
sure.
I was exposed to that a couple nights ago, And I was shocked to see Ben Davis jump into such drastic catastrophism with both feet, as someone said earlier.
Yeah.
One would have to think about the amount of mass, even in the crust itself, and how much energy it takes to displace that crust.
Right.
That's a lot of work in physical terms.
Absolutely.
Not to mention the energy required to melt that boundary between the crust and the mantle. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And how is this energy arriving in what way from the sun? I don't understand that, and I think that's the weak point in that vision, is that you have to present to me a back of the envelope calculation.
Right. What about this idea on it, where because he's showing that the shift of the magnetic strength pretty radically. You've seen the curve, right, as it's kind of plummeting down. I think what he's positing is that instead of there being that radical move, there's a sudden that sudden shift could potentially cause a plasma. I think a plasma event. So.
Well, I believe that the connection is,
and then it flips back and it's back to where it was, right? Just in short order.
Okay, he's talking about the collapse of the magnetic field. The motion of the magnetic poles is a symptom of the collapse of the magnetic field. And when that happens, the energy from the sun then enters the planet and then melts the boundary layer. And when that happens, it causes the crustal displacement.
Okay.
Let's believe I understood that was the mechanism that he was proposing.
Okay.
I did not understand how you could have that flip back. I mean, one thing is to move the thing, but another.
But he's saying that's what this declassified document says.
Well, are we in the Thomas Bearden type of crustal displacement idea, the Charles Hapgood type area? Yeah. Is that where we're floating here with this?
What was the name of the scientist that Ben brought forth? Was it a Hapgood or not?
I think it was Hapgood, and then he refers to another one with the Adam and Eve story as
that's what I'm looking for.
Charles Hapgood was, if I'm not mistaken, someone who was proposing crustal displacement like the skin on an orange type of movement via the weight of ice on top of that would grow up around the poles. It would be
right. This other report that was released by the CIA with a pseudonym name. That was it was proposed that it was a different. It wasn't just the ice that would flip it. It was actually the magnetic distortions that would cause it to flip, and it would do that every 4,000 years.
No, 40,000.
Oh, I'm sorry, 40,000. But then every time it would flip back to somewhere where it originally was, or somewhere close to it. But it would be like this oscillation every back and forth. It wouldn't like do a one shot and then right back to again in one event. No.
Well, it's just it is, I read this. This is in Fingerprints of the Gods by Graham Hancock. That's his book, has parts of Hapgood's stuff in it. So I was just wondering where they were connected and what the mechanisms were. But you're saying that there's another mechanism thrown in there that was thought up by the CIA? That's interesting.
Yeah, if you put on the captions from the movie, since there's no audio, we could probably see what there's being said.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to get a grasp of what I'm looking at here. The CC button.
Where's the?
I think he said Hapgood was CIA, and that he came out of, I think, Columbia, where they recruited a lot of.
You're not coming through clearly, but buddy. I'd say for 2019, let's work on getting you a clear connection.
Oh, I think he's at work. That's all.
When you're at work. When you're at work.
Yeah. He needs a signal booster.
Something, yeah.
But go on. I'm very fascinated by this.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting.
Okay, so Graham Hancock talked about the end of the last ice age. Lately, he's been talking about a meteoric impact, and there are some evidence for that. A couple of weeks ago, we had the announcement that a very large crater was found in Greenland. I don't know if you heard of that.
Oh yes, definitely. We've talked about it on the show. Fantastic.
Well, that should make Graham Hancock's life a walk in the park, because that's what he's looking for in terms of the end of the Younger Dryas and the cataclysms that would have ensued because of that meteor impact. I don't think...
The thing is that, I mean, if you believe the ice core records at all, the end of ice ages is a cyclic event.
Uh-huh.
Which wouldn't be explained by, a one-off cause, So it's really, it's indicated more there would be electrical oscillations that cause it.
And the electrical oscillations and not the Milankovitch cycles, for instance, another theory I've heard over the years.
Actually, that's get thrown at me quite a bit too. There's always some guy on my feed trying to feed me Milankovitch cycles and stuff.
Well, but that's all gravitational, which
that is
of one form or another, which is going to give you exactly regular cycles, whereas these are only semi-regular. It's more like a noisy electrical circuit with oscillating elements, but with all kinds of perturbations coming in, and so it's not exactly regular, but it's semi-regular. Okay, also, we were talking earlier. I wanted to chime in on the magnetic field. They talk about the magnetic field going to zero. Well, the thing is, there are strong currents coming in the top and north and south of the Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Those currents generate magnetic fields,
Mm-hmm.
and so my own view is that the Earth itself doesn't so much have an inherent magnetic field. It's whichever of the two incoming currents is stronger. It gloms onto the iron content of the Earth and makes it a magnet of that polarity. And so if it shifts from north to south, that's just because the relative strength of the two currents change significantly. And when it's zero, that just means they're balanced, maybe ready to make a shift, but we're still protected from solar flares and cosmic rays, whatever, because the overall magnetic field of the Earth is caused by those two incoming currents. So anyway, that's my view on those topics.
The only problem with that, though, is then you get back to that idea of the magnetic field like the field around a wire, and that's not how it works in a plasma. I mean, if there was a wire coming into Earth's North Pole and Earth's South Pole, then we might expect where all the current isn't contained in that, we might expect those magnetic field wound around by the right-hand rule. But in a plasma, that you got to throw that completely out the window, and you get these reversing magnetic fields, which lead to no net rotation in either direction, and that's the
no. In Don Scott's Bessel function, if you look at it, most of the energy is in the first wave. Quite a bit, it dominates, and then the other ones you could more or less say cancel out. But there is the strong current and the strong magnet. In fact, his whole model is he's simply taking the central current and mapping its magnetic field as it radiates out.
Mm.
He didn't. There's those reverse current. He actually should do a secondary calculation. What about, say, the next reverse current in the next cylinder? It has its own magnetic field, which is the reverse of the first one. So
right. Well, that's what I'm saying, though. But to see these the counter rotations, for example, in the auras or the north poles of planets, we clearly must have a reversing magnetic field direction, even over the surface of the planet. But then that negates a net magnetic field in one direction for that. There's got to be many field reversals, even over the course of over the radius of a planet, for his model to explain the counter rotation that we see at the poles of planets, for example.
Oh yeah, but I'm just saying you need to do this the integral, the sums on magnitudes, and I'm claiming, well, I'm putting out a claim that there is a dominating current and a dominating magnetic field. And then there's other ones too.
I might chime in, I think importantly for the idea of ice ages and the climate on Earth in general, is that electromagnetism is a more important driver of global weather than thermodynamics and gravity. And that's one of the things that I kind of appreciated from Ben's point of view, is that up to now, meteorologists have concentrated on thermodynamics, gas pressure, and gravity to try to predict the weather, as opposed to seeing the weather dynamics as a consequence of the coupling of the lithosphere and the ionosphere. So that the swirling, moving currents in the air are, in fact, driven by electrodynamic principles. I think that, to me, is the most attractive thing, especially when talking about ice ages and hurricanes and tornadoes.
Yes.
As far as crustal displacement and stuff like that, I think it's really far-fetched. I don't think there'd be anything standing if that ever happened. We do find some things standing around.
I don't. I don't necessarily buy it either.
Tectonics either.
Tectonic theory.
Bruce.
Well, actually, I do have some problems with tectonic theory. Obviously,
Right.
But especially when before there was no possible forces that could even remotely do something like this, and they had to basically all rely on radioactivity and heat within the core to do all the work. But then we found that there's layers,
which is why they're saying
non-melting
that Antarctica is melting in certain places.
But it seems much more likely that we have that a lot of the stuff that we probably think is deep internal heat might just be a surface feature. Pressure is obviously going to increase, and there's going to be some molten things further on down, but there seems to be stages or shells to the Earth inside, at least in the way that we have like the density maps and the fact that we find a layer of, they think it's metal, but it's probably moving charge going in a particular direction, and then the earthquakes peak at certain spots and then go down, then peak again at like 1,500 meters or 1,500 kilometers and so on. Like there's just more to it than our simplistic view, I think, had. And I don't exactly know what's going on in there. I have some ideas, but.
So these would be driven by the electrical connection between the sun and the earth, right?
I would think that because basically, just like we were talking about, all the power that's expressed by all the planets and the sun, so all of that heat, movement of wind, kinetic, electrical induction, all of those things are I shouldn't say must, but should be expressed on the heliopause of our solar system, because that power must transfer across that and get down into where the planets and the stars are, or the star is. And so in that same sense, all of the power that's being sort of expressed electromagnetically around the Earth should also be expressed by under the Earth as the currents are following their circuit. So the possibility then that there are layers in which this sort of goes no further and then begins to induce something below it, because obviously the movement on the surface would induce the same movement on the core, at least electrically, because induction is not the same thing as just turning into heat. Obviously that's wasting power. That's conversion of electricity. That using electromagnetism, you don't actually lose that until it is converted into something else, like movement.
That's kind of why I was always suggesting that Philip Francis and Bruce Laybourne should get together, because they keep talking about the
they should
exactly the physical circuit going into the atmosphere circuit and then back out to the sun. It would be pretty cool to map in
Eugene and I had a nice conversation with him, and then he's got the tectonic uplift, which is pretty interesting idea. So.
I don't know much about that. I mean, I can envision a situation where that would come into place, but I mean, but we had different debates with Peter Mungo Juppam, exactly like, and of course, what was his name?
But we're just watching what David Brown was doing with the mud and stuff. If you could just like even just pull the air or something, or have a land strike somewhere, all that air and supersonic winds will start pulling the water everywhere. You could just have equally as much force going without the tectonic plate lifting up and throwing everything like a catapult.
Also, the magnetic fields that are being produced by some of these currents are themselves containing energy. That's how an inductor works. It holds energy in the magnetic field. Once the circuit stops, all of the basically the circuit reverses itself, because that energy, if a voltage was being produced and a magnetic field was generated, the moment you turn off that current that's feeding that, it reverses and the voltage switches in the opposite direction, and it begins to dissipate all the energy in its own magnetic field. And we've seen that in some work, but that could be a very interesting thing. That could be why earthquakes happen. Stuff like that. We don't really know. I am now literally laughing at my 1980 self going, you thought you knew.
I could comment on that.
Doing it too.
I could comment
on
that.
What was your 1980 self like?
Young.
Silly.
Silly. Still playing in the dirt.
Credulous.
Anyway, go on, Robert. What were you saying?
Bruce was talking about when he was doing his work with the all the lightning in Tampa Bay, right when Hurricane Irma was doing that 90-degree shift. That he said that the lightning in Tampa Bay was going completely crazy and off the charts in there. But at the same time, there were seismic events over in Idaho where they received I think almost 200 or 2,000 events in 24. I think it was 200 in 24 hours, but they weren't really, a record of capacity to disable anything. But they were recorded over 200 in 24 hours at the same time when that hurricane was doing the hard right turn, and he based that off of the magnetic anomalies in the mantle, where he saw those, and he predicted that hurricane to turn 90 degrees 2 days before all Noah and all that other stuff. So there is some kind of correlation there to what you were just talking about.
I was finding this particularly interesting this week. It's the coherence of Mercury as far as its rotation. It's the 3-2 thing. It's interesting.
Look up the Mercury anomaly. It's actually an anomaly too.
What are we looking at here?
Orbit of Mercury.
It's Mercury. Remember, Richard, we were talking about 3-2. It's like this one came up this week. It's the 3-2 resonance of Mercury with its rotation versus its orbit.
Mm-hmm.
And so
it's precise like that. You mean
it's precise? Yeah.
So why?
That's
exactly.
a good question.
That's my question. We're usually not allowed to ask that one, right?
I do know that I looked at the Mercury anomaly because I was looking at the Pioneer anomaly, and so I found out that there was an anomaly in the orbit of Mercury. Something about the mass versus its orbit makes no sense. Apparently,
it's got a very
magnetic field too.
It does have a magnetic field, and I think that is very important.
I think that might have to do with the mass problem.
It's a gravitational map on it too. It's got these two nodes with it.
And this must be very recent information, maybe from Messenger or something, because
I've never seen this before. No,
I believe
under a crater too. Do you notice that the mass is right under a crater?
Well, the way those arrows, doesn't it? The way those arrows were pointing, it was like a little magnet being shifted by bigger magnet to line it up. So it'd be like
you might be right.
What's this? Yeah. This one? This one?
The surrounding solar magnetic field evidently grabs it and just holds it where it wants it. I mean,
and it's not
makes it align with it.
I was going to say it's also not because it's moving out and in. It's crossing magnetic field lines, so to speak. So that might have something to do with it. You might be right. Because usually, if you stay in the same orbit, like if you stay in the circular orbit, you're at the sort of like a much more minimum configuration, I guess. Same as staying near the ecliptic. If you go up too high, you're going to be generating more load, so you want to be down lower. There's a lot of things like that I've noticed about, the orbits of planets and how they would conform to, like, oh, you have a magnetic field? Well, you're going to want to go over here. Why? Because the right-hand rule, dummy. You're going to go over here.
I like the left hand. But the right-hand rule is okay.
Well, it depends on what you're talking about.
Depends on your perspective. Depends on your perspective.
Let's not do this.
I need to do it because you're treating it like it's the law.
Well, it's just it's
like anyway.
I wouldn't say law, except that's the way it's going to go. The law came from Maxwell, I guess.
That's a whole other.
Ampere had an idea, then
I'm still a Faraday fan.
Well, who isn't?
But this thing is amazing, and we have the 1-1, of course, with the moon and the Earth. That's an obvious 1-1, but 3-2. What are you talking about? Pretty exact. I mean, Venus shows a little bit of it, but not nearly. The rotation of V. I was looking at this too, but these are all just my initial perusals. But the rotation of Venus is almost as long as its orbit, almost. But that's anomalous too to me. But this is coherent. Why is Mercury highly coherent?
I honestly don't know. I want to.
Yeah. It gets into our whole, the whole.
I would love to experiment and try to figure it out. Like, if you could see if you could make a rotation do this with a couple magnets or so forth.
What would cause it? Yeah. What would cause it?
At least it'd be looking in the right direction. But like I said, and there might be, it does have mass issues because of its orbit too. So, and I didn't even know they existed. Apparently the Mercury anomalies from way back when, like 100 years. They started noticing with their new telescopes that for some reason it was not behaving as it should. And maybe that has to do with the fact that they think it has an iron core because it has a magnetic field. Maybe. I'm not sure.
Cool.
Can I mention one more?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, that planetary pole shift idea, that catastrophic part.
Right.
The part that gets me is that, like, the EU catastrophe people they kind of pick and choose which observations they want to focus on. And the one observation that you're stuck with, though, again, that came up in Hamlet's Mill, it's everywhere in the mythology, is that alignment of Saturn. Yes, it's at Earth's North Pole, but the background stars that you see that are in the constellation that contains the star Canopus, which is basically at the south ecliptic pole. So if you want to take those the mythology at its face value and say that they were actually recording actual events, Earth's North Pole had to have been at where the south ecliptic pole is now, and that's what a lot of these guys they just kind of ignore. That you don't talk about background stars, you talk about where planets are compared to Earth and the Sun, but they just kind of wash out that whole background. But the only way that mythology can be right is if Earth's pole was almost completely inverted from where it is now. That's the only way the background stars would appear in the mythology where they say that. And that's the part that really gets me. And that's, in other words, the idea of a complete 180-degree pole shift for the Earth is ingrained as deeply in that mythology as the planetary alignments. But again, if
terrestrial pole shift. Right?
Yeah, an actual geophysical pole shift.
Right. Right.
But see, the whole idea, if we want to go with the mainstream idea that spin is just left over from gravitational collapse and conservation of momentum, then yeah, a pole shift is very unlikely.
Yeah.
But if you want to put it in with any driven mechanism, if it has anything to do with current flowing into the poles, if it's current flowing through the poles, if it's the fact that the Earth is moving along a current filament, it doesn't matter. What that means is there's a background magnetic field that the Earth is in, which changes with radius, and that, according to that whole Bessel function model, only slight changes would completely flip that around, which means that the small scale filaments, whatever's driving rotation, then could completely change around. You see that the whole objection that it's unlikely to have a geophysical pole shift comes with the idea of thinking of Earth as spinning in a vacuum, and if that's the case, yeah, it would take some real explaining to do to argue that we could, get a change in that. But if you stop thinking of the Earth as if you even think that it's strung on a filament or aligned to filaments, then you've got a whole different dynamic of where to explain why that might actually happen on fairly quick scales. See, I'm of the opinion that there actually was a geophysical pole shift, and that those explanations of the ice ages being that it's always an ice age somewhere. I mean, a 90-degree pole shift would make it all of a sudden an ice age in what was tropical things. I know you guys are probably familiar with that argument. That's probably, was that Hapgood or who said that those frozen mammoths, for example, they had tropical plants in their digestive tract when they were frozen.
That was actually mentioned in this episode right here that was showing. It was just in the.
I have heard that a lot. Honestly, though, I have not seen the source, but I'm sure it's there. But I've heard it since,
But that can't be explained just by like if you had a rapid cooling event. Okay, that still doesn't say why it would remain frozen. It had to have gone from a place that was tropical to now being in a place that stays frozen for that to happen.
John Cook had a really good opinion of that. Actually, his idea was that the fresh water that was coming off of the snow that was falling from around the electric current that was going into the North Pole of the planet, that kind of idea, and it would snow around it. That snow would build up and, of course, create these glaciers underneath the thick aurora, the dusty aurora that they had going on there just near the planet. But if you go further, just further south from that, the light of Saturn, if there was a light at the North Pole, would be a constant ring around the planet, and so it would be very lush just below that. Fresh water coming down, very lush. This is where these things, and then of course when that ended, it was over. And things died, basically. But that's just an interesting take on it from the Saturnian point of view. But I'll leave that to, like I said, I can't do him justice. I just recommend go read it because it's a very fascinating read. But
okay, I would point out that a possible causal connection between gravity and electromagnetism is an important perspective here. That as incredible as it may seem for a crustal displacement and or the entire physical globe turning its axis, all of this is not resolved, but certainly made more possible with a causal connection between electricity and magnetism.
Yes.
And so I point this. I've heard anecdotes of people who have been in a house, trapped in a house that had been lifted by a very large tornado. And they report being weightless inside the house while the house is being lifted off. And if it were not real loss of gravity, the person, whatever was happening, would be pinned to the floor, to the ceiling, to
wherever it was going. Yeah.
Wherever it was going. there would still be gravity and inertia involved.
This is not the first time I've heard this. This has actually been talked by one that Mark Spann survived a hurricane. It came right through the area. I'm not sure if it was a 4 or 5. It was a pretty big one, and he jumped in the tub, as you do. But he said he was looking out from underneath this tarp that he had, and then he felt this, as you said, this feeling of weightlessness, and he was inside a closed room with no windows open. It was a bathroom. He could see the brush, like his toothbrush and all this toiletries on the sink, just start floating off there, just like that. So there is the possibility that perhaps maybe there is because of the sheaths of the tornado, or we'll call it the Birkeland current, whatever this is, is somehow able to counteract gravity and gives and perhaps maybe counters gravity by basically removing the potential of where the sense that Wal Thornhill's gravity works. He was talking about electrets and so forth. And it's exactly that same feeling that I get when I talk to Jim when he's talking about the sun solar system being stuck to the side of this funnel that's going through space. It's a very similar thing. There's sort of like you could see it like a house would be glued to the side of this thing and just rotating around it. It should be flung. I mean, the mass of the house should be flung off to the side, but it's not. It sticks there. And you can see it right here. If you back up one picture, just one, you can see what I'm talking about instantly. Maybe not that one. It was, I think, that one.
That one?
Yeah.
No, it was in the,
it was the
upper
first
left
one?
corner.
Upper left? Was the upper left?
Upper left corner.
Yeah, that's it. Notice the debris cloud on the outside is not part of the main funnel, the main funnel coming down from the cloud, but it's the debris cloud just on the outside. Everything's sticking to it. If you see what I'm saying.
Yep.
Going up that snake. It has a brown haze around it. I think that's like the debris cloud. That's like an area where things will just want to stick to it. That's my interpretation of these facts. It could be wrong, of course.
Okay, so then the coalescence of matter and the loss of gravity in a system, all of these, I think, are really important to understand whether there was or not crustal displacement, whether there is or not, whether gravity is an epiphenomena due to alignments of atoms in a particular field. This is all in the same sort of pool of thought. Mm-hmm. And we just don't have the mathematics or a coherent theory to deal with this. And let me take us out to outer space. When I look at, I spent a lot of time looking for what I called near space. I wanted to find groups of stars that were nearby, and to see if I can see anything. The closer stuff is, the more you can see. And I did, in fact, find high galactic latitude pockets, and they usually were accompanied by lots of proper motion in the tiny stars. And these tiny stars, or in these areas, I often found things that looked like plasma discharge. What I'm trying to say is that the phenomenon in the tornado may have a counterpart at interstellar scales. And it may have a counterpart.
I'm sorry, if you see, David, if you go to Andy Hall's last report on the daily plasma, he talks about how bigger storms could actually possibly do what you're just talking about there, Ignacio.
Yeah, I think that's very important. I think it's very important that we have to stop dividing gravity and electromagnetism and thermodynamics, for that matter.
Right.
And try to understand events in nature from a higher point of view, some sort of epiphany on how to do this. I don't know if that means through better mathematics or through some ayahuasca ceremony. You get some transcendental view of nature, something of the sort. About.
I just anecdotally, is that how you say it? The Northridge earthquake, I had the great pleasure of experiencing in '94, and I was awake and I was standing up, and the vector of gravity changed along with all the rumbling. The vector of gravity changed, and it's like, what's up with that? And I remember it clearly to this day. It was easily like 25 degrees.
Where? What was?
It's like, what the hell's going on
during an earthquake?
It's like, yeah.
Well, that's incredibly interesting.
It was incredible. Yeah, it's like that was much more. It was much more unsettling to me than the shaking.
Yeah, I bet it was.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, like it's like, oh, we're gonna fall off the earth.
It's like, the floor's tilted now.
Okay, so
with the floor tilting.
Right in there, the eye of the storm.
Creating a pressure vessel is not a difficult thing. If you guys can resolve electrogravitics, and I can resolve making a pressure vessel, we can get out to Mars and Mercury and check it out ourselves.
Yeah, let's do it.
I want to make a UFO. I want to make an anti-gravity craft.
I'm there.
It's. I say this half silly.
Me too, but I do agree with you actually on a fairly deep level. What an exciting thing to take on. You know?
Right. I mean, if we could just somehow obtain a synthetic or syncretic perspective on all of these varying phenomena with the not motivating factor, but directing principle that gravity, electromagnetism, and probably thermodynamics all can be resolved into a deeper understanding of nature. I think that's transcendental for our consciousness, our civilization, for everything.
Absolutely.
Boy, maybe our grandchildren. No.
It's us. We got to do it. This time around, we got to do it.
All this can be done. All we just need is funding. You see.
Well, that's what I'm telling you. That's what
Isn't that the truth? Eh?
I'm getting my pitch head together with .
Oh, I would love to go down there to walk through from LA. Here's my Canadian friend. He'll tell you why you need to spend money on the electric universe. Well, let me tell you. Ignacio, tell him what's wrong here. Tell him about space. Tell him what's wrong.
And here, at number one.
I'd love it. I'd love that.
Right.
But I mean, I think that the only reason this has been allowed to continue, even though it directly contradicts a lot of the electrical engineering that we do today, is because it doesn't actually have any product. Like the product is in our heads, understanding the universe is the product. But if it was like, I mean, once
demonstrable.
and we think that we've managed to send ourselves to space and all these little probes are going out and everything's great so far. But there will come a time when something bad will happen. There will be like a bunch of people will die or something because we did something wrong and we didn't take some electrical thing into account. That's just an idea of what might occur. And little things that keep bothering me, like those planes that were under 250 feet of ice in 70 years. They just dug those planes up, those ones from World War II. And so I'm thinking, wait a second, how many feet of ice in how many years?
Yeah, well, we don't know.
That's what I mean. I'm like, how much can I take out of anything that's being said by anybody now? There's certain things I understand. Like you can tell apparently because of some sort of dust in the air that when the Roman Empire ended. I didn't know that. That's pretty cool. But, and they can find that layer in the ice. But, I mean, it's amazing how much of that I have to take on faith,
Faith and hope drive our psychology.
It's true.
Fear, uncertainty, and doubt, too.
Well, we have to
drive our survival.
most academics don't have the courage to question the framework in which they're in.
Mm.
That is why they're academics, because they rather be told how to be and simply comply with the current in which they're swimming. It takes a lot of courage to buck the system and to realize that a lot of it is make-believe.
Right.
And a lot of the make-believe is there to quiet our intrinsic fears. The fears of the unknown, the fears of our own inability, our own fears of death. There's a lot of frailty to the human condition. So kudos to anybody.
Yeah, but I the thing that gives me like some forward motion and some momentum on this, and the problem that I see is it's not the hiddenness or the false narrative is not out of compassion. It's out of the dominance and power, you know, and this is why we keep you blind, you know, or do not encourage questioning this narrative that I find in many ways, you know, crumbling a bit.
Dominance and power is a motivating factor in any hierarchical structure. That does keep people stupid, and sometimes deliberately so. And I have heard that electromagnetism, as was formulated by Heaviside and Stiglitz at the turn of the 20th century, is actually a truncation, because their own experimentations early in the 20th century had led them to, you know, open transdimensional portals and, curved gravity and all kinds of stuff.
There's a lot of that right around that period of time going on.
Right. And so maybe 2019 is about going back to Maxwell and Stiglitz and Heaviside and learning quaternaries, you know, moving the stuff out of matrix calculations, because it doesn't deal with rotating systems very well, whereas quaternions do.
Yeah.
And this idea of rotating fields is exactly the what actually opens the door to electrogravitics and dimensional travel and all of these things.
Which explains why their spinning is always associated with electrogravitics, including gyroscopes.
Yes, exactly. And we're getting a lot of whistleblowers out of the sort of dark military areas these days. And some of them are credible, some of them are not. But the idea that there is a great deal of a capacity that is not widespread in our civilization, I think is a common theme these days. Mm-hmm. And it may actually be rooted, or the effective solution for this is in rotating electromagnetic systems and mathematics that has been truncated out of EM.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that, you know, Stiglitz, okay, you know, who was that guy? There's a Californian guy. Oh, gosh. He's an electrical engineer. He's kind of weird. I don't remember his name.
A little weird? Let me think. Electrical engineer that's a little weird. Eric Lerner? No, Eric Dollard.
Dollard. There you go.
Yeah.
I apologize to Eric Lerner if he's listening. I apologize.
Why? I'm a fan of Eric Dollard.
Well, anyways.
No, because I called him a little weird. Eric Lerner is not part. Eric Lerner is part of the plasma cosmology community. So.
What about Dollard? What do you think about Dollard?
I'm very intrigued by him.
I'm more skeptical, but only because I, would be the type of guy who would go, show me your schematic. I'll go build it myself.
Yeah.
And some of the things that he's said, I don't know if what he does, for example, lights up the light bulb at a distance. I could think of a way that I could be tricking it,
He actually shows them doing this here, and this is a good couple of Russian guys that have done this recently.
Well, it's not the only person. Constantine Mail has too, but a microwave is just basically doing magnetic coupling. Or I think it is. You're right, I do.
For a non-experimentalist.
Well, actually, I am a technologist. So, but
active.
No, you're right. I'm not active. Well, no, that makes me sound so bad. I sound like I'm defunct.
No, you're not.
No, I'm not defunct. Okay, that makes me feel better.
We tangle a little bit here too. So, by the way.
Anyway, what you're looking for? You're looking for this. Anyway, that's my thing about Dollard. There's parts of him, there's parts where I go, wait a second. And there's also that little conspiratorial bent that also Dave loves about him, but I'm like, really? Because, I mean, there are some true conspiracies,
his story, when he talks about the history, he's got a very, very tight view of the history of just the canon of electrical engineering, quote unquote. He's very, very tight on that. I can tell personally he's been in the field a lot, and the thing that I find there's a Barrett. The things that he references directly towards what the thing you're pointing at is what I find really super compelling. So.
What's it again? What do you find super compelling?
With rotating magnetic fields and
rotating magnetic fields. Dollard presents a little bit deranged, like he traumatized. Dollard presents as a traumatized psyche.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good way of saying it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he was. He went against the system, and they fried him basically.
That's what I'm talking about. He presents like he's been traumatized. He does present competent as far as electrical engineering, and he does present socially dysfunctional, as many prodigies are. Right.
Yeah, that's why I don't immediately just dismiss him, because a lot of times I've learned from him. I've gone, hey, I never thought of it that way. Oh, I didn't think of cells having induction and capacitance along their membranes. Thank you very much for pointing this out. Here's how he's showing maps of cells, for example, in an electrical sense. I was like, oh, that's very interesting. All that kind of thing. And of course, some of the history. But like I said, some of the times you have to take the history with a grain of salt. Like RCA and this other guy did have a patent thing, and BJTs came out of that because FETs were made first. But does that mean that they weren't making a business decision? It doesn't. By taking it personal, you can make it personal, if you know what I mean. It might just be something like, well, the board of directors decide, fuck that guy.
What were they doing? What were they doing back in the 40s with all these really high energy experiments that kind of point towards playing around with these things on a military level?
Well, that's a different ballgame. I don't really know. I mean, something worth investigating. I'll tell you that. But I've heard some obviously, crazy stories, but
that's kind of interesting.
He's playing with a magnetron. That is just awesome. What he's doing here.
Yeah.
Buddy wanted to
ask a question,
Ignacio, about the Hopf vibrations.
Hopf vibrations.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, HOPF.
This is getting into the Quaternions and what they're showing, and it's really interesting. I'll put that up.
Yeah, he's posting it.
But we gotta watch him blow up the cell phones though. He does the cell phone blow up.
I know of Quaternions, but I don't think I can solve a Quaternion. I mean, I don't think
I deal with them all. I deal with them all the time with what I do, so I'm familiar with them. They're fascinating, but it's basically one as an imaginary number is on 2D. The Quaternions are 4D. Yeah. So it's one real and then three imaginary parts. IJK. So.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Hey, David.
As much as I know. I don't know what a Hopf vibration is.
Yeah, let me show you what that is. It's very cool. So we get out of all this destructive things here. So.
The boys and their toys.
The boys. I remember doing that when I was a kid. Let's see if I can get to this. Let's see. I'm dealing with this damn touchpad, so it's kind of
Okay, this is my call, guys. I have to get off.
Okay, no problem. We'll talk about it next time, man.
Yep. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, very much. Take care.
Well, that's okay. We just got David Brown on. We could talk about something else.
There you go.
Oh, okay.
Hey guys.
Hey, how you doing?
How's it going?
Good. I realized the day and the time, so I thought I'd hop on and let you guys on.
Sure. From.
I think we're gonna have to get rid of Ignacio, though. Oh, he muted. Perfect. Okay, never mind.
Yeah, I think he just got his call. He left.
Oh no, he was just. I was just hearing him talk. So I didn't want to. I didn't want to hear his phone call. That's all.
Right.
Or I didn't want to listen in on his phone call more appropriately.
Right.
So, hi, Dave.
Hey, what's up?
How you doing, man?
I'm doing good.
All right. We were just talking about quaternions, so I brought this up, and then Ignacio had to go. So.
Oh, right on. We all been going for 2 hours now, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, one of the things, this is probably a good time to put it on the table at least, is we proposed the classic thing you do right around this time are the year in reviews.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so today we thought we'd do that. So just for what we're thinking about for next year, et cetera, and how everyone feels the year went, et cetera.
Right on. I think it was a pretty good year. It was definitely a little different for me.
Okay. Why so?
Well, I never thought I would be electrocuting things in my garage this year. And making.
I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did.
I would have never, in a million years, thought I would be making things that look like things I see on our planet or elsewhere. So that's been fun. It's a better hobby than playing video games all day.
Right.
I totally agree.
Well, you say that.
I totally agree. And by the way, making video games is a lot better hobby than playing.
Well, I still get plenty of video game time in every day.
I was going to say,
I never. It's weird. I never did that. It's like, I deal with attack all the time. You know? It's like.
Admittedly, sometimes I shut down video games to go and do video editing because I want to. Like, I just want to video edit. Like, I just want to go and make this show. I just want to make, So, like last time, I was really impassioned.
Don't you find that a more like healthy pursuit?
Oh yeah,
the actual creating of something versus like the virtual environment that play around in.
The achievements.
I think that a lot of times it used to be that it was a sense of community in many cases when you've left high school, you're on to now left college, your groups are now farther apart, your ability to hang out with them is lower. So now you're like, okay, well, I can get that same fix by playing WoW or playing something else. But then I realized that when I got into this community, especially in the last 3 years, because I've been doing this for 13, but in the last 3 years, I've really been like investing myself into it, and it's became more and more satisfactory, more and more satisfying.
Okay.
And obviously, including the people I'm meeting and so forth. So
what's that with what are you comparing?
Well, compared to my gaming. I used to
so you're going EU and like the gaming is the long one, 13.
Well, this is now where I'm getting my social interaction from, my social self-worth, I guess you could say. But games now are just a simple escape. They're like reading a book where I don't care necessarily. I'm doing like I'll play Fallout so I can build some stuff in communities, and then occasionally go fight a big monster or something. Or I'll play Minecraft with my friends just so that we can build a castle together for no particular reason.
It's a community. It's kind of a community tribal thing, though, right?
Yeah. Well, it's just completely. It's completely shut down because I don't play with other people. I don't need to beat you in a game. I mean, if I'm playing a game against my friends, that's fine. I will gladly die and laugh. We'll all laugh. But if you're playing like one of those things where I have to compete, because I need that for my social standing and I need so I will feel better about myself, that is not there at all anymore. So now it's just like, I don't want to delete my games, but I very, very rarely play them except for like someone goes, "Hey, you want to like go shoot some zombies?" I'll be like, "Yeah, sure, that's cool."
Okay.
Oh, you got eaten, haha.
Okay.
You know, that's fine. I will gladly play them with Dave or anyone else. Let's play some Left 4 Dead 2, whatever. But
gladly pay you on Tuesday.
You know, gladly eat you on Tuesday. No, and then you'll have. But you know, it's just what I mean. They're now officially escapes again, as opposed to someone getting. I don't have any social. I don't care. I don't want to be the leader of your guild. I don't want to be. You know, I don't want to help you form your raid. I don't want to have to be up at 2 a.m. to go heal your party. I don't care.
Right.
You know? Right. So I want to now. It's like, oh no, now I play Fallout because one of the things I can do with Fallout is like, this thing's bothering me. Go into the console commands, edit out that thing out of the game. Excellent. It's no longer there. Moving on.
What's it called? What's it called? You play? What is it?
Oh, Fallout 4. But you can do console commands in that. Basically, you can do debugging codes and put them right into it. It's like, I want to be invulnerable. You know, so it's not what I really want to do that.
They did a mod of Battle. It was a Battlefield.
Mods. I love mods. Yeah.
I mean, he did a serious one. It was one that like got a lot of traction where there was like 50,000 to 100,000 players. Not simultaneous, but user base. But he was just fanatical about it. And he was part of a group that were building all the new models of planes and stuff. And it was amazing. It was just amazing, the detail. Yeah.
Well, it takes a long time. It's beautiful. I mean, if you put a lot into a good mod, you can change any game into something else. Right. You know, I'm very impressed with a lot of things that they do.
Yeah.
I love that picture.
I mean, he had it was in the 90s and early 2000s, but he had a line into like one of the servers on like remember LimeWire?
Of course.
Remember that? Yeah, and it's like but there was another within LimeWire. He had a line into like all the premier CGI, Maya, and there was a ton of them, but Maya he focused on particularly. But it just the latest release and all the plugins and everything, you just boom here. You buy it off the shelf. It's like $15,000, $20,000. That was amazing.
I actually used that picture on the top there as my presentation.
Yeah, I ran across
proof of building.
It's really interesting.
Like this is when we were talking about like when James Sorensen, that's whose name it was, by the way, that I forgot. But James was saying, I don't know if it comes down, if it just instantly turns the air and everything in the water into rock. But this is the type of thing where I was wondering, does it build up? Because you can see ripples and you can see it's got pulled to one side,
This geometry. It's really fascinating.
I love all of this. And look at it being pulled
Devil's
there.
Tower.
Right to the side. Look at all that damage.
Yeah. What happened?
Well, it had to happen while it was fluid, in semi-fluid state,
This is, you can see the elasticity of it there, right?
Yeah, and it seems like it was pulled up or built up in these like a bunch of anode tufts all building up together, and then pulled sort of to one side as the wind came by, and then stopped. It was no longer there. It was just continued debris kept building, or it got cut off or something. But still, it's just wonderful to.
But it has this hexagonal. See the hexagon? I mean, it's not all. It's either pentagonal or hexagonal, right? Which is very interesting.
It reminds me of the tufts at the top of the sun. That's what it reminds me of. But notice how there's also this. Like, I can't tell if that's been grinded down flat, or are those rings real? Like, if those are rings from the current going across the top, because look at the marks across the top in the same direction, type of thing. And the other picture had it in a sort of a circle. So it makes you wonder about was there a tornado on top of this building up?
How'd they get this geometry?
Oh, it's the dicyclotron instabilities, they're called. There's that basically plasma tends to divide itself into different 6 and 5 are common. So
right.
And you can see that one in black and white there.
that's where, phi and pi link together really fast there.
I noticed that too. And of course, that's a big thing because plasma behaves on exactly that ratio, the golden ratio.
Right.
But if you go a little bit up, just one or two pictures up there, see that black and white one? Devil's Postpile National Monument right beside your thing?
Oops, sorry. Yeah.
No, you went away again.
No, I know.
There it is.
I have this touchpad there.
Oh, okay. Well, see how it was not building that way, and then it was building that way, and then it stopped, and it was just being built up by things falling on it then. You know what I mean? Like there was an order, and then the order stopped. I love that.
Right.
And it continued.
Right. So that's like it's in tune, and then it's attitude.
What's interesting is how it pinches there at the ceiling, at the arch. It looks like these two.
Well, it could have been that river could have been going through there the whole time. We don't know.
Yeah, and that could have kept it separate. True.
And of course, as it got a blob on top that was no longer being pulled straight, and then suddenly this weight hit it from the top, and it started like piling up and piling up and piling up. Some of it was falling into the water, but it began to overstretch and eventually connected together as the building continued. That's just in a theory, of course, But I have to envision this now with things falling from the sky and welding, like falling from the sky and welding on a scale hitherto unimaginable. Like to imagine, like see this mountain range? It fell down and was welded there. Like, oh, like, how do you explain that? Welded. Like, so anything that was there underneath is underneath that weld, which means you'd have to literally lift up that mountain to see what was on the plains before. And there could be a whole city down there. We never know. Mm-hmm. Could be 1,000 people running for their lives, all sort of squished, like in a Pompeii-like event,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to think of it that way, but, it wouldn't surprise me. And this is why sometimes when I hear about, like, in the ancient past, they were down underneath a coal seam in 250 million-year-old stones, and they happened to find a hammer, this guy's skull, and a golden watch. Like, what? Like, how did that happen? Like, he could have just been sitting there in the California beach, the planes going all the way out, like the natives said, all the way to the shoreline. He's sitting there doing some fishing, and then, boom, the Sierra Mountains. Like, gone.
There's those same patterns across the top, Neil.
Yeah.
I'm seeing it on everything now.
Yeah, that's why you see a six-sided one on the north part of Saturn, for example, and you'll see I think there's a five-sided one on the south pole of Jupiter, maybe? I'm not sure.
On the Earth too. I mean, they vary.
Of course. Oh yeah, that's not perfect.
Five and six for sure.
But these would have been like wiggling together as they were building up.
Yeah, there's a thing called a Voronoi. Just the Voronoi pattern and the Delaunay pattern, but they're very similar to this. It's a method of doing, tiling, and if you want to tile like maps, etc. But they're very similar to this.
They should have actually. This flatness actually depicts something I never thought of before on the top. Because if they didn't polish this, which I don't think they did, then if they're saying it was lava that was growing up, well, how is it flat on the top? Wouldn't parts of it grow faster than others? Wouldn't they sort of be a disjointed thing? I don't know.
Hey, you know what material that's made out of? That top layer?
I believe it is granite, but I'm not sure.
This granite as a
Isn't it basalt?
Basalt. Thank you.
Basalt sounds right.
Yeah. And basalt happens to have a high iron content, which makes it particular that it could form a magnetic confinement.
That's really interesting. So I've been doing an experiment this last week. I haven't posted it yet because I got a lot of editing to do. But I used clay and salt water and got a different reaction. It gave me more of a instead of an arc discharge, it gave me more feathery filaments, kind of like you would see on the surface of the sun. How they arc off.
Funny. Back. We saw some of those in West Forks, where you can see evidence where it had material inside of it, and it seemed to drop that material as it was going around a corner, because you just saw a big blob of it there, and it seemed to feather out. We can only see the evidence of the feathering, but this is me and Andy trying to envision what we're seeing. But you saw it went up and just cut across the top of those mountains, like in this valley. So I can see that material does make a big difference. And we don't do enough experiments. Like one person only uses graphite. Another person only uses dirt. I mean, if you can combine those and see, especially salt. Salt's a big deal.
Well, on this last one, I added iron oxide. I dusted it over the top. And
did you get hematite?
Yeah, I was meaning to ask you about those. Was that the electrical sorting that you're trying to show, or?
Yeah. So there's, I just posted one about the little Martian blueberries that I made. So that was part of this process.
I like that.
Before it made those blueberries, it actually, spraying water on top of that iron and creating a mist on there, it actually started to flatten these large circular areas before it started discharging to make all these arc points. So before it transmuted the material together, it flattened out, what was a moundy, wavy. It actually flattened out the area in almost a circular hexagonal pattern before it started to eat into it. I thought that was interesting looking at these, these hexagonal patterns you're showing me. And then in the movement of that circular surface flat area. That's not going to show. I need to upload that video to show you what I'm talking about. But I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe
I'm just have steel frames up on the geology page.
Yeah, it's just going to show those blueberries. But I'm trying to describe something that I can't show you yet.
Okay. Yeah.
But it was interesting
right.
that on the iron portions, it was the electricity was feathering out into.
Well, the little blueberries that you made are on the page, but he can go show that. But
I'm just wondering if those little filaments are splitting out into each of those. If each of those hexagonal shapes are a little mini split of a filament coming out, and it's focusing that frequency to generate what that shape is. That's what I'm wondering. I don't know.
I mean, it's very crystalline, obviously.
Yeah, and you're seeing right there, mainly the white is the salt. Those little blueberries would be a combination of the iron with the salt and the mud, the clay mud. And then the black material over on the left is the remnants of the iron oxide. It's black iron oxide. But yeah, this doesn't give it justice to what I was trying to explain. There was a different part in my experiment. Again, it was flattening out. The electricity was flattening out the iron and making almost like a patty cake. If you did that in mud, it was patty caking it with the electricity. So that's the best horrible description I can give you.
I totally get it, though. This is the beauty of going down into back to childhood.
Yeah.
I remember doing that. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
I did play in mud a lot. I made lots of catastrophic flood situations with my Hot Wheels outside.
I had a sandbox, and we would build like big mountains, and then dig all crazy tunnels through them. And then we had plastic green army men and placed them and had mock intrigue.
Take our GI Joes and blow them up with some firecrackers.
It was weird. It was fun.
Blow them up with some microwaves.
Yeah,
like what the Russians did.
So what was interesting about this little blueberry section? The discharge was focusing where those blueberries are, and it was almost a dual filament that was just locked in there the whole time, and it would arch out and almost rainbow out. I got a really beautiful purple to gold plasma that was just kind of modulating back and forth. Almost seems like a worm was splitting itself. But it would latch onto another area that looks all melted and then kind of flip over to this other circle that you're seeing on the right. So it's kind of modulating back and forth, but there was always one solid connection over where those two little blueberries formed.
Okay.
Obviously, I think the hottest concentration point to mold those materials into a sphere of some sort.
Well, this is the hematite, right?
I guess it would be hematite.
What did you sprinkle? Iron oxide?
Yeah, synthetic black iron oxide, which is the core component in hematite.
And it pinched into a sphere, which I love. And I'm see things like this that make me wonder if we'd be able to, you know, like this is the type of thing that could you imagine if like down where we think there's a magma chamber, we just find these two, we'll call them volcanic testicles, and that they are down there.
Lovely.
Yeah, thank you. Well, and let's not talk about how a volcano erupts then, because that metaphor would just get worse. But what I'm saying though,
go ahead, Neil.
No, I think we've done enough. But what I'm saying is that maybe there is something maybe there's something underneath these volcanoes, something like that were the remnants of these things still processing. Because you turned off the electricity, but at the end of the day, the electricity doesn't ever turn off on the Earth. Yeah. It's always flowing. So I just could envision this. I don't know any truth to it, of course, but it's things like that make me wonder. I would love to. But, I mean, obviously there's a great danger for, let's just say, shaving off the top of an active volcano and seeing what happens. So I think we did that once, and it was Mount St. Helens. You know, like, so. But this is the type of stuff that I think is going to be where you're going to find these connections experimentally. I like the fact that you had a secondary jump, but the metal always was attracting more. And the metal, of course, makes sense because it would have itself a magnetic field. It would therefore also, because it's also there, would have an electric field because it would be generating one because of the current going through it. So here you are. It continued to attract, and little things were jumping over to this other side, but they kept going back to this other spot, as you had said, or at least sustained there. Yeah. It's things like that you're beginning to see how this gas works and how it could affect landscapes and so forth. And what would this look like if we're constantly raining material down on top of it? You know, like would those balls get buried and then would a volcano form on top? You know, type of thing. Or
could they turn into concretions and get bigger?
Oh, well, that's the thing. We don't even know how concretions are made. Although I think this is how they're made. What you just did literally is how they're made. But it's the magnitude that we need to begin to understand from, I mean, these little tiny spheres, or the dust of an arc slag to these tiny spheres to little hematite balls. The hematite balls that I have from Vemosat Laboratories were made at 140,000 volts at God knows how many amps. And they're only about maybe 2.5 millimeters across. Okay, that's how small they were. And they were at that voltage. So to imagine something that can make the giant stone spheres of Costa Rica, so we're talking something that's 2 or 3 meters across. How much current and voltage would that be? And then, of course, scale it up to moons and planets. And how much of a current would that be? You know, like this. You see what I mean? Like you're trying to wrap your head around this. It's orders of magnitude. So will they build? Are concretions made for building? Well, most of them seem to be hollow, built to have a crust, and then the crust might there could be layering on top of it. That's been seen. There's been off-centered cores to one side, just like seem to be like Neptune has a magnetic field core off to one side of the planet. Like no one knows why that is, but you see it in concretions where the sphere center is not the center. And in those situations, I would imply or feel that it was falling, building up as it goes through the atmosphere, one side pushing down, having more air resistance. But it's still built up on it, and as it continued. But again, these are total speculation. I mean, and of course, some of them are hollow too. How does that work? You know?
Yeah, well, I've cracked open a few geodes in my day, and every geode that I look at on the outside, it looks like there is an entry and an exit point, or a positive and a negative point, if you will, from what I see. And then when I crack open, the shape or how the material flows together inside, and usually even with the crystallization, they're pointing towards each other on opposite sides of the geode.
That's very interesting.
You know, again, if it's what I was told from my experienced geologist friend, retired teacher, he says they were shot out of a volcanic explosion and hardened while they were in the air, landed in soft dirt, and then were buried.
That's reasonable.
Absolutely, but you know, if it was slag created in midair, you know, it stuck in between some converging ionic winds and hot molten dust or something is thrown together and created and then left there. I could see that as well.
Well, the polarity part is the big hint for me, because if you have each geode should have, if I'm not mistaken, a general hemispherical bulge around the middle, a divot at the top, and a bump at the bottom. Now, as much as you can say that's generally the rules of how to find a geode, that's also the description of the Earth.
Mm-hmm.
We have a divot at the top, we have a bump at the bottom, Antarctica, the Arctic Ocean, and we're big around this middle. So it just never ends. We're obviously to think about this without bringing electricity into it, and especially if they have polarity, because you see the polarity. I mean, that's how you find them. That's how you know you get something other than just a friggin' rock in your hand. So anyway, it blows my mind every time I look at these things, because did I tell you I found one when we were out? Me and Robert were out. Just walking down the friggin' San Rafael swell, waiting for them to get back. They dropped me off in my car after 3 days in the wonderful heat of the desert and the rain. And, I just was walking down a riverbed, dry riverbed, and, the one where my car wouldn't get over, Robert. And,
I remember that.
And I just looked down, I'm like, what? And it was already cracked in half.
Cool.
So I have it here, and I went back to Wesley's house there, Robert, and he polished it up for me. He said that it was hard to polish because it was really hard. It was like, quartz crystals and stuff, right? So.
Wow, yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it's awesome when you find things like that, especially broken. What would have broken it? What force would just crack it open while it was rolling down a river? Probably nothing. So,
Probably just hit another rock.
Monster truck.
Who knows? It could have been one of those giant boulders that were up on the cliff edge that we saw.
Oh my God! Some of these things that we saw there, that man trap still gives me nightmares. By the way.
Oh that does that one. Yeah.
There was a geode just up on the top right. If you scroll up just a little bit, and there was something. Yeah, what's that? Found embedded inside. What do you find?
I'm sorry to cut you off there, David. Is Ignacio still on?
He's muted.
No.
I assume he's still on his call.
Okay.
Anyway, you were saying?
That geode right there, the guy holding it, and it looks like there's something in the middle.
Oh, with the circle? Yeah. With the circle?
Yeah.
Yeah, what's that?
To the far right.
To the far right, yeah. No. Close.
Yes, I'm back.
There it is. Oh, he's back, yay!
Yeah, what's that in there?
I don't know what that is. Man-made metal found embedded inside ancient. Yeah, maybe it's not ancient.
Yeah, it looks like a fishing lure. Click on a different image. That one's blurry.
Yeah, man. Chop, chop.
Trying to be demanding.
He's going to come right through and smack me.
Huh. Interesting.
Oh, that looks better. Okay. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me that, the geode would be the core, and if it got hit by lightning, it could form a fulgurate around it. Maybe something like that.
Yeah, if it formed
that that'd be a pretty powerful lightning bolt to make a geode that big, though.
I like to speculate about things like this.
Well, OOParts are a thing that I think we've all loved. Turn them alone.
Buddy wanted to ask Ignacio while he's still here, since Buddy's having a bad connection. He wanted to ask Ignacio about if he's a proponent of a simulation hypothesis universe.
Uh-huh. Boy. Okay, so let me put that modern meme into context.
Please.
When we had when rational thought turned to cosmology in the 17th century, clocks were the forefront of technology, and the idea of the universe as a clockwork became popular as a metaphor. It is. I would have to caution people that because what we perceive as a simulation or game environment is at the forefront of our technology, it is easy to imagine the universe as a simulation. Okay? That's one dimension of that problem. The other dimension of that problem is our, how can I say this? We live in our imaginations. We are a product of a limited sensory input and of whatever deductions or inductions we can make from that. There may be a greater reality that we're not aware of that would make this reality seem to be artificial or not constructed, but lesser than, because there's a higher state of consciousness to be experienced. So there is some validity to casting our conscious experience of today in the guise of a simulation. Because, okay, that's enough right there. I can't say one thing or the other, but I do have to caution against those types of biases.
Sometimes it almost seems like a cop-out.
Appreciate that answer. Appreciate that answer.
Not your answer. I just mean the whole thing in like, well, it's a simulation.
The Matrix.
Yeah, it's. Don't get me wrong. I enjoyed the movies, but still.
Can I just?
But thank you. Yeah, that was. Yeah, I'm sure Buddy would appreciate that too as well, Ignacio. Thank you.
Yeah, Heather.
Oh, I just earlier you said something, and then now the conversation came back to it, and I had a thought the other day, and it's like there are 7 billion worlds happening on this planet right now, and that is the human. So every person is in their own world, because the perception of reality is based on each individual's perception of reality, and that's the extent of at least the number of people on the planet. Not to mention if you extend consciousness to animals and plants and whatnot, which I do. So that's a lot of different worlds all happening and interacting right here on this rock, right in this place. So I mean, I often think that there is, I often think it's like there is this larger consciousness, our consciousness happening outside of ourselves, and this is what people are starting to see more and more of, scientifically speaking, when we find a place where thoughts are coming from. Are they inside of ourselves, outside of ourselves? Talked to Eileen McCusick about this quite a bit, and just the idea that like maybe out of this physical realm, there's another dimensional realm of consciousness that sees things, obviously from a different point of view, right? Because it's a different level, a different space, a different sphere. So all of the things that we consider physics and physical and that are applicable within this sphere might not necessarily be so true outside of what we can perceive, right?
Certainly the tradition of the mystical tradition would support that point of view. That there's a condition of consciousness, that overarching consciousness, or consciousness that is the encompassing set for all the individual consciousness that we experience. And that there are paths to that awakening. That would be the mystical perspective. And that's been around for a long time.
And tapping into the Akashic would be part of that greater consciousness of understanding. Yeah,
that's correct.
It's interesting how disparaged it's been over the last 300 years or so.
Well, even more than that. Longer than.
Well, okay, so think about this. Every scientist who is watching a needle twitch is still watching a needle. You know, the person who's actually noting the transformation or the phenomena is the human consciousness. In fact, science can be described as a version of consciousness of consciousness.
Right.
Right? And so go
consciousness
into
observing itself, right?
Yes, we are observing ourselves to make sure we're not making a mistake, and eventually even the needle is not really there. It's how we are interpreting it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's always, when you do the proper reasoning, it always comes down to consciousness of consciousness. You go into meditation and mysticism, it's the same problem. It's the function, consciousness of consciousness.
And that's the mentalism, though. The idea that that's the first principle, is that it's all happening within your own thought structure, within the consciousness of consciousness. And then somebody asked me before, and we kind of got into like a little debate over it about what came first, consciousness or physics. And my response is that they both came at the same time, because the consciousness that we experience, the physical form, is different than the consciousness that was experienced before the physical form. So that type of consciousness became at the same time. And they was like, but then what came before that? And then it's like that, the outer layer. There's something else that we may or may not be privy to. I mean, I think we all feel it. We are privy to it because we're a part of it, and we all feel it. Sometimes it comes as intuition. Sometimes it comes as deja vu, forethoughts, like telepathy, understanding what someone's feeling from a distance, Those types of experiences speak to that, especially when you download information that you may not be aware, like, where did it come from? I didn't know that before, inexplicably in that sense. But there's definitely a long lineage and pattern of it being there and being recorded. So there has to be a differentiation between not just subconscious and conscious, because that is strictly within the self, right? That's a personal thing. So the accepting levels of consciousness outside of ourselves, and then outside of the realms of possibility for us to perceive, I think will make great strides in understanding ourselves better and understanding why things happen and work the way that they do.
There's a lot of that.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, tell me. Absolutely.
Perhaps I would go back to the beginning of your statement, Heather. What came first, physics or consciousness, or the physical or consciousness? I would say that we have ideas about what the physical world is. We have sensations, but they're not the thing in itself. We're always separated from, quote, creation or manifestation by our senses, and then by our conceptions of those sensory inputs. And you're asking us whether the physical world or the consciousness world came first. I would say the consciousness world. Because even if what we perceive as the physical world existed before our consciousness, it would not have existed for us. We are born into a fully formed universe. We're born into it. It doesn't exist for us.
I guess that's what I'm saying, though. The differentiation between that consciousness, the consciousness that came with the physical form, and a higher consciousness that is a vibration under which we have yet to physically observe, that was present before physicality came in. So in order for us to perceive the physicality that's around us, we have to be consciously equipped for that. And so when you talk about the dreamlike states and being dead and beyond life and things of that nature, all being in a different plane, right? Yeah. There's a higher level of that even still. But that's a level that doesn't necessarily need physical existence to maintain its consciousness. Is that the same type of thing at all as the thing that we're using to converse right now, to have a conversation, to be aware of, conscious, aware of what's happening at this point in time here? I think they're two different things.
Yes. But it gets to the mystical, we propose and expect that there is a higher level of consciousness. Some of us have some experiences, and some of them have others about that level of consciousness. It's hard to be objective about it. That's it's a big challenge. Objective as in positive. I have a positive validation or verification of the information that's arriving in a non-sensorial fashion.
How do you know when you're lucid dreaming versus you're awake?
What about it?
Oh, well, that's what I question. You know, where do I go when I'm in my dream state? Or, you know, you've got your deep REM sleep scenario, and then you have your awake consciousness, but then you also have a moment of lucid dreaming where you can mix the two together. So it's that's what has always stumped me, is where does my consciousness go when it's not awake with my body? And goes to show where did I come from before, and where will I go once I no longer have this body? I think that's the question everyone's asking.
And a much harder question than resolving the problem of electromagnetism and gravity.
Yeah.
Oh, seriously.
This is all part of it, though. Is that a window? Seems to me that that's kind of like a window in, maybe, where it jumps out of the materialism.
Boy, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So many unanswered questions.
I think enjoy the journey.
I don't know about you, people, ladies and gentlemen. I've been asking me that sort of question Heather has put forth for 35 years.
I think that's one of the things. It's certainly one of the things that's pulling us together.
Definitely. Like what? Okay, so I have terrible reception until on Tuesdays, so everybody knows that. So I just listen, and try to be here to support. But what's interesting is that a lot of the things that came up in the topic of conversation today here came up either simultaneously elsewhere, like outside, like around me, people talking, you know, out around me that had nothing to do with this conversation. Can't even hear it. It's on headphones. You know, and they're just miscellaneously walking past me, talking about similar things. You know, and things happening. There's a lot of synchronicities, things that happen, and why are those? You know, I mean, I guess like they're like, well, if you're looking for them, they happen, but really, I mean, not to the degree that they can if you're open to allowing that channel. Like you're saying, when you reach that meditative state, or you're in like a lucid dreaming state, where somebody had a near-death experience where they kind of crossed over, or maybe that they were in like a hypervigilant state for a very long period of time that forced them to be more open to different types of, like, more perceptive in different ways. So there comes that level of like, is this like natural perception, sensory perception that we're gaining this information, or is it that we're actually kind of become in tune with something we've connected with through these types of experiences? And that
it must be the video that's playing right now, because I'm totally tripping.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So you're tripping. It gets you the whole way.
Beautiful. Yeah. It's very appropriate.
Oh, good. Yeah.
There's your answer right there. Somehow, some artist. Like.
Yeah. No. These are very good. He does very good visuals on these videos. It's the Crow House. This is Max Egan.
Not to make light of Heather's commentary, I think it's very profound. And it does point to a consciousness as our context. Not what we experience, but as our context. And there being some overarching, I don't know if it's an entity or a quality of, we can say, time, to use an abstraction, that is spilling out through the people around Heather, that is manifesting in the way we are imagining the course of our conversation and what to contribute. And that's very hopeful. That points to a reality that's greater than what our sensorial awareness gives us, and that what our rational mind can reach on its own. And it's very comforting. If you can, well, it can be very comforting.
Or absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, well, it does give you that sense of connectedness, and it also gives you some sense of like, it can give you like that, you know, like a a speck, or it could give you the 1,000 points of light, right? It could give you that, like, I'm just a little thing that doesn't matter, or it can give you that I'm a part of a greater whole as the sun brightens, like, comes out of the clouds and shines on me while I say this. So it's again, a matter of your perception and a matter of how you choose to see things. Because if we see it as an opportunity of growth and light and expansion, then that's what it'll be. But if we see it as a cold and darkness and scary and, like biting, then it'll be that too.
Right.
So
right.
It just, how do we deal with it? How do we see it and interact with it within ourselves? I think it comes down to a lot of like that monologue, like when we're in this place of contemplation or talking, like you're kind of like talking to yourself. But then there's like a voice that's inside of you, so that it's kind of quiet and very natural, and it's like telling you to do something, and like that's like the voice of intuition, the voice of the higher self, like this little nudge that feels safe and feels comforting, and it's okay to, and it takes like generally a long time. If it's like something that's coming at you really quickly, like you have to do this or, the world will end, then that's probably more anxiety that's, pushing like a panic that's pushing that. So it's that we don't have the opportunity in our daily lives and society today to really sit and meditate, and also to appreciate I believe it was this conversation or last time you were talking about the shamans, and maybe it was Dean Radin. Somebody was talking about how the shamans, they live in a very different world than modern man. Even though they're coexisting, they're still here right now. But the way that they perceive the spirit of things, the way that they perceive the interaction, the way that they perceive their presence and its purpose is very, very different than what we're taught to accept. And yet it is so much, in a sense, more real, because it encompasses and incorporates a holistic aspect of all of the different attributes, not just the personal, physical, human, rational aspects, right? Because if it's irrational, then it must be crazy, or you maybe imagined it, or it must be fear-based, but there's no tangible thing to it, then we can just dismiss it as something that doesn't really exist, or is like questionable, or is a portion of our psyche, when it really is a real thing, a real phenomenon, something that's actually happening. And if we acknowledge it, we are better off in the long run. It makes life easier. It makes things less stressful. It helps us get to know ourselves and others. It helps in so many ways. Why do we dismiss this whole life around us? What benefit does that to us to dismiss it?